Thank you, Jennifer, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today on our KDKD Radio and Facebook group. It's truly a privilege to get to give the first message of the year. Pastor Steve's taken a well-deserved break and some time off from the Advent season, and luckily he asked me to deliver today's message, so I always enjoy getting up. It's a little unusual today. We don't have a full house here, but I trust that on this frosty morning there are hundreds of people joining us by Facebook or the radio. Today's scripture reading will be Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 through 9. Is there any such thing as Christians cheering each other up? Do you love me enough to want to help me? Does it mean anything to you that we are brothers in the Lord, sharing the same Spirit? Are your hearts tender and sympathetic at all? Then make me truly happy by loving each other and agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, working together with one heart and mind and purpose. Don't be selfish. Don't live to make a good impression on others, but be humble, thinking of others as better than yourself. Don't just think about your own affairs, but be interested in others too and in what they are doing. Your attitude should be the kind that was shown to us by Jesus Christ, who, though he was a God, did not demand and cling to his rights as a God, but laid aside his mighty power and glory, taking on the disguise of a slave and becoming like man. And he humbled himself even further, going so far as to actually die a criminal's death on the cross. May we take these scripture readings to heart and help us start out 2021 much better than 2020. 2020 was quite a year, probably a year that we will all remember, but not in a good way. A year where we saw civil and political unrest, a worldwide pandemic that unfortunately took millions of lives across the globe. But it also brought out the best and the worst in people. And depending on how you view things, when you look back at 2020, you're going to say, boy, that was an awful year, but I remember this. It was a time when, unfortunately, we saw many elected officials, people that we trusted to guide us, let us down. We saw them issue lockdown orders and close down businesses, only to be found hiding at local restaurants with friends and lobbyists, having dinner when they were told we could not. We had officials who put travel bans in place, told us we couldn't go anywhere. For the safety of everybody, we had to stay locked in our homes, only to find them hopping a plane and traveling the globe to spend time with their family. And just when you're ready to throw up your hands and think, what in the world is going on? I've had it. You hear good stories. You hear stories about individuals who would walk into a local restaurant and leave hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars in tips to waiters and waitresses that they didn't even know. And then there's a story about a young lady who worked in a daycare center. She had 30-some children whose parents were disadvantaged. Many of them were out of work at the time, and she took a job driving for Uber nights and weekends because she knew if she didn't do something, there would be no Christmas for those children. So I hope that as we look at 2020 and put it behind us, we think about the good things that humanity did, because that is truly what will keep us going. And as we look forward to 2021, hopefully we can take those lessons and become better people, and maybe not focus so much on ourselves, but focus on other people. And in today's scripture reading, the Apostle Paul wrote that while he was sitting in prison in Rome, waiting for his ultimate execution. Now, I'm not a biblical scholar by any means, but as I researched today's passage, even though Paul was probably at the end of his life, he wrote about serving mankind. He wrote about being a good person, about working together and sharing your privileges and your gifts with other people to uplift their lives. And I think we should take that reading to heart and look into ourselves and see if we follow that. And today's sermon, the old brown car, I can first say that I never had an old brown car, so it's not about me. But it's a lesson in humility. And if you'll sit down and put on your seatbelts, we'll go on a little ride. Once a month on Friday for the past 5 to 7 years, I go to St. Louis to meet with some clients. 12 times a year, one Friday a month, I always go. Doesn't matter what the weather is, what time of the year it is, once a month I have to be there. And I don't mind it. I like going on rides. I don't mind driving. I'd rather drive than fly. But there's one thing about me, and you can ask Meredith that. When it's time to come home, I'm ready to go. And I'm not stopping. The only way you're going to get a break if you're in that car with me is if I run out of gas. So I'd left the house at 5 a.m., went to Jeff City, picked up my partner, and off to St. Louis we go. And now I've spoken before about the illness that I suffer from. It's called time delusion syndrome. But today was going to be different because it was in late spring, early summer, and I'd promised Meredith that I would be back by 4 o'clock, have the car loaded so that when she got off work, we could go down to the lake, to the camper, and have a nice, relaxing weekend. And in true form, I thought, I'm not going to let her down. This time will be different. Chuckle. I'm going to be back home by 4 o'clock. So as I did the math, leave Clinton at 5 a.m., Jeff City at 7, gone from Jeff City. I'll be just in time in St. Louis at 9 o'clock for the meeting. The meeting always lasts 2 hours. If I get out of that meeting at 11, 11:30 at the latest, I'll be on the road, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30 back in Jeff City, drop off my partner, out of Jeff City by 2, 3, 4. I'm back home and I'm loaded up. I've got it made. I am not going to let her down today. I'm going to make this work. And the drive over was fine. Traffic was fine, no mishaps at all. Got out of the meeting on time, and off we went. Now, I was in the Lincoln Navigator, and I'm known to drive a little faster than I should, and off I went, flying down I-70, and things were good. Traffic wasn't too bad, and probably got 20, 25 miles outside of St. Louis, and things came to a screeching halt, and I could feel my blood pressure rising. I kept looking at the clock on the console. This is really messing up Shannon's day. It's important to me to get home on time. I can't believe some fool up there is driving slow. And I navigated around, in and out of traffic. Public hazard number 1 on the highway, but I had to get to the lake. I just couldn't get anywhere. Right lane, left lane, going, cursing. I was a bad person. I just kept driving. I had to be back in Clinton. I had to be home by 4 o'clock. I had to go to the lake. I had to be at the lake by 5 o'clock. That was my goal. Traffic was just stifled. I couldn't get anywhere. I kept being very aggressive, in and out, in and out. And finally, in the distance to the west, I could see the problem. Something was blocking the fast lane. Too far to tell what it was, but I could see people going to the right and passing. With the skill of a NASCAR driver, I started negotiating my way in and out of the traffic. I had to get around that obstacle. Never once did I give any attention or thought to the individual that was blocking traffic. I just had to get past him. Finally, with very skillful and aggressive driving, I got up behind it. And it was an old brown car. Maybe going 40, 45 miles at the most. I looked in my rearview mirror, and for what seemed like miles, people were behind me. but people had got around on my right, and I could not get around this old brown car. And as I looked in the back window of this car, it looked like whoever was driving, all their possessions were heaped up in that back seat. It was an old, long, four-door car. I don't know much about cars. I don't know what make or model. It was blowing oil out the back, blew smoke. And I chuckled to myself. Thought, my suit costs more than this old brown car. And finally, I saw that I had an opportunity to pass. I yanked the old Navigator to the right, and I slammed on the gas. As I looked over my left shoulder, I got ready to give that smug, arrogant look that unfortunately I'm very good at. I thought, I'll make this fool feel so bad for blocking traffic, for slowing down my day. I got to get to the lake. What right do they have to be in front of me, slowing me down? And in the few seconds it took to get even with the front seat of that car, I looked to my left, and the world stopped. Because inside that car, with her hands clutching the steering wheel, white-knuckled, was an elderly woman. I mean elderly. She was old. And by the terrified look in her eyes, I could tell she no more wanted to be on I-70 early afternoon than Shannon Cooper wanted to be behind her. And I often talk to God. And I'll admit he doesn't talk back. Sometimes I get signs and symbols. Today, on that day, was the clearest sign ever. And I believe if Jesus had been sitting next to me, he would have cursed me. And he would have said, Shannon Cooper, you fool. Where's your humility? Do you not care? Never once did you think, traffic's backed up, I hope no one's been hurt. Maybe there's somebody on the side of the road with a flat tire that I could stop and help. Maybe somebody's car's broke down and they need a helping hand. All I cared about that day was getting to the lake, getting to the lake. And that thought is burned into my memory because sitting beside the elderly woman, strapped in, was a middle-aged woman who very obviously was suffering from severe physical disabilities. I felt so small. I doubt they had ever had the opportunity to go to the lake, let alone get out on a boat with their friends and loved ones for the weekend. How dare I have those thoughts? I have a beautiful wife, a healthy son. Things like that don't even enter into my mind. I had no clue where those two individuals were going, but here's what I can tell you. Society obviously had forgotten them. Society had turned their back on those two individuals. It was clear by the car they were driving, by all their possessions piled in the back seat. And what made it worse was there was Shannon Cooper, wearing a suit that did cost more than that car, looking down his nose out of his Lincoln Navigator and judging those people. What kind of person had I become? What gave me the right to judge those individuals? I had never walked a yard in their shoes, let alone a mile. I had no idea the difficulties that they had endured throughout their lives. All I cared about that day was getting home. Being home by 4 o'clock so I could pack up and go to the lake and have a good time. I was a bad Christian that day. And I felt horrible as I passed those individuals. And if there was a way I could have pulled over, I would have given them the Lincoln. I would have given them the expensive suit. And I would have given them the money out of my pocket because I felt so horrible. My arrogance had taken over. I had forgot about mankind. I had forgotten about people who life has dealt a bad hand. I have been fortunate. We have been fortunate. Those that are participating today in this service, we have all been fortunate. I hope those of you who are listening today realize how fortunate you are. That old brown car taught me a lesson. It taught me a lesson in humility. It taught me that I am very blessed, but there are thousands, millions of people around this world who are stuck in that old brown car. And it's up to us to help them get out of it. So as we enter 2021, I hope you'll remember the old brown car. I hope you'll remember and look at your life and realize how good you have things. And never forget mankind. As Paul said in today's scripture, Jesus came to this earth. He could have been a God. He could have acted arrogant, but instead he chose to be like mankind. Walk with the common people. Live like a slave. Live with nothing. And at the end of his time, died like a criminal on the cross for us. I hope you'll all keep that in mind the next time you come upon that old brown car. When you're traveling the I-70 of life, I hope you'll remember today. And remember that we can all do better, that we should all walk and live with humility and care about our brothers and sisters.